We're following this breaking news out of Syria, where the sudden collapse of the al-Assad regime is raising all sorts of questions for the United States. Joining us now to discuss, Senator Mark Wayne Mullin. He's a member of the Armed Services Committee and represents the great state of Oklahoma in the U.S. Senate. Senator, thanks for joining us. So as the Assad regime collapsed, President-elect Trump posted on Truth Social, quote, "This is not our fight," and arguing the U.S. should not get involved. I certainly understand the sentiment and the desire to not have U.S. troops involved, but what happens if extremists who are part of the rebel groups get their hands on Assad's chemical weapons and plan to use them against the 900 American troops in southern Syria or against Israel? What happens if we see a resurgence of ISIS or Al-Qaeda in the region because of this? Is there no role at all ever for the U.S. here?
Well, when it becomes a national security interest and a threat to the United States, then we would get involved. But I agree with the president that we shouldn't be involved in this. This isn't our fight. But make no mistake about this. This wasn't an accident. The rebels didn't just suddenly find an opportunity to move forward. What had happened here is Israel had completely taken out the ability for Hezbollah, which is a direct arm of Iran, that was controlling a lot of Syria that a lot of people didn't understand. When Israel completely decimated Hezbollah, this left the door wide open, and I don't think it was a mistake that the rebels moved. I believe there was probably some coordination that took place. I would be real surprised if there isn't some interaction that the rebel force has had with the IDF on the timing of this. The timing is always important, and it wasn't an accident the timing took place the way that it did in this point too. So the person who's wounded the most here is Iran. Some stability will take place, I believe, in Syria now that Assad is gone. When you had Iran, which is an extreme terrorist, terrorist government, and you have Russia who's controlling the airspace, and you've had Assad who's been willing to use chemical weapons on their on his own citizens, then that is just destabilization. I don't know what the rebels are going to bring in, but I don't know how you could get much worse than what you already had underneath the current regime.
So all this happens at the same time that former Democratic Congresswoman, now Republican, Tulsi Gabbard, who is President-elect Trump's nominee for Director of National Intelligence, is preparing to go onto Capitol Hill this week to meet with senators. Gabbard met with Assad in Syria in 2017. We interviewed her right afterwards. She dismissed U.S. intelligence findings that Assad used chemical weapons on civilians, as you just noted. And she said that Assad was, quote, not the enemy of the United States. What do you say to Republican senators who are expressing misgivings about whether or not she's the right person to be in charge of intelligence at this moment in history?
Well, a lot of things have taken place since 2017. Her position, obviously, because of the actions of Assad and what has happened in Syria, has changed. Keep in mind that when she went over there, she was still, now she wasn't over there in uniform, but she was a captain in the National Guard. Since then, she's has moved to reserve in the Army. She has been promoted from major to lieutenant colonel since then. She's currently over the reserve unit in all of Oklahoma and Missouri. She has clearances. She's able to do her job, and I think she's 100% qualified to be the next director of national intelligence. And so I'm excited about her opportunity because she is perfect for the position.
Another key Trump pick is Defense Secretary nominee Pete Hegseth, who seems to be facing an uphill battle. My understanding from Trump transition officials is that there are probably enough Republican senators with concerns about Hegseth right now to block his nomination were the vote to be today, but it is not today. One of the most prominent skeptics, shall we say, is Iowa Senator Joni Ernst, and now a pro-Trump group is running a TV ad targeting Ernst in Iowa. Here's a clip from it.
Pete Hegseth is a patriot, a decorated combat veteran, and a warrior who will stop at nothing to keep America safe. The deep state is trying to stop his nomination, but Pete isn't backing down. Call your senator today and urge them to confirm Pete Hegseth for Secretary of Defense.
So that ad seems to suggest that Joni Ernst is part of the deep state. She's a combat veteran, a survivor of sexual assault. She has legitimate concerns, as do many of your Republican colleagues, about Hegseth's nomination. Are you comfortable with this pressure campaign targeting Ernst?
Well, that didn't come from the Trump team themselves. You know, people have their own ideas, their own directions. I think Joni has the right to be able to question this, and I think Pete's doing exactly what he needs to do. He's on Capitol Hill. He's speaking with senators. There's been absolutely no no's from Republican senators at this point. He continues to make his case, and his case is something that when he sits down with you, he's able to articulate very well. I think Pete will make an outstanding Secretary of Defense, and I believe that he's going through the process. Now, he has an uphill battle, but he's taken the fight straight to Capitol Hill like he should. He's going to have a hearing in Senate Armed Services. He'll have to answer 12 tough questions, and I believe he'll be able to answer every one of them. At the end of the day, I believe Pete will be our next Secretary of Defense, and he'll be perfect for the role. I mean, right now we've had Secretary Austin. Secretary Austin is a general in the Army. He has been a disaster. We have low morale. The only reason why we are even kind of close to having some type of recruiting numbers is because he's lowered the threshold, but we're nowhere near where we should be or where the previous threshold for recruitment should be, because people aren't wanting to fight for Secretary Austin. You have Pete, who is a combat veteran, 2 Bronze Stars. He was a major in the Army. He's been in the public sector. He'll go there and make the changes in the Defense Department that needs to take place. And I think he's exactly the one we need, which is why I believe he will get confirmed at the end of the day.
A number of your fellow Republican senators have publicly expressed concern about Hegseth's pardon me, reputation for excessive alcohol drinking. Here is what Hegseth said a few days ago on the Megyn Kelly show.
First of all, I've never had a drinking problem. No one's ever approached me and said, "Oh, you should really look at getting help for a drink." Never. I've never sought counseling, never sought help. I respect and appreciate people who do.
Just a few years ago, however, on the Will Cain show, this is how Hegseth described his experience with alcohol after returning from Iraq.
I'd look around at 10 o'clock and be like, what am I going to do today? How would I drink some beers? How would I go have lunch and have some beers? How would I meet my 1 or 2 buddies and have some beers? And one beers leads to many, leads to self-medication, leads to I've earned this. Like, don't tell me I can't.
It seems to be in that Will Cain clip that he's describing having a drinking problem. How do you reconcile that with him now claiming that he's never had an issue with alcohol?
Jake, that wasn't him saying he had an alcohol problem. That was him being honest. Unfortunately, a lot of our combat vets have come back and faced the same thing. They're sitting there and they had their identity in the service. They had a job to do. They were responsible for certain things, and they get out of the service and they're back and they're sitting there twiddling their thumbs. They've had a lot of experiences that the regular population doesn't. They have these memories, these thoughts, these sounds, the smells that are still coming back to them. And they turn to drinking with their buddies. That doesn't mean that they had a drinking problem. That means that every combat veteran has had the same issues. That's why they have VFWs set up. That's why they have American Legions set up. What he was describing is what most combat veterans have faced. And for the media to go after him and start describing that as a drinking problem is individuals that doesn't understand combat veterans because they've never been there. They've never been in combat. They've never seen the horrific stuff that comes by that. They've never tasted the dirt in their mouth. They've never heard the horrible sounds in their ears. They never had the sights that they can't get rid of. They've never had the dreams in the middle of the night. And I think it's hypocritical for them to even question that. Now, if he did have a drinking problem, that would be obvious. But to make something out of it that isn't there just because he's going through Secretary of Defense, the media should be ashamed of themselves. They should put themselves in their shoes and every other combat veteran's shoes before they go out there and criticize him.
So I have done a lot of coverage of veterans and a lot of coverage of combat. And while I have never worn the uniform, I think I do have an understanding of the need of our valiant troops when they come home to self-medicate. What I'm saying is when you're talking about drinking at 10 in the morning, that's a drinking problem. Now, it doesn't mean that there should be a stigma.
Then there's a lot of politicians that have a drinking problem, Jake.
Yes, of course. But I guess my question is...
Yeah, and then there's probably a lot of media that has a drinking problem too. And now I don't drink. I haven't tasted alcohol in many years, and never have drank at all in my life, really. And so I really don't understand that. But there's a lot of alcohol that flows through Washington, D.C. on a regular basis. And I wouldn't say that people are alcoholics or they have a drinking problem because of that. I don't see it at all. I don't see that being a problem, and I really wish that the media would move on and start focusing on what he can bring to the Secretary as Secretary of Defense, because he has a lot of good attributes too. But we only focus on the negative, and we get so caught up on running at negatives. And just because he's on this side of the confirmation process, it seems like everybody wants to point out everybody's faults. Yes, he has a past. You know, Jake, you and I both have a past, and our listeners have a past too, and we get that. He's not hiding from his past. He's answering the questions of his past. That doesn't disqualify him from being Secretary of Defense, though.
You know, part of the process is Republican senators and people in the media and Democratic senators and anyone asking questions about the person's qualifications and about the appropriateness of an individual. And a drunk reporter who's drinking at 10 a.m. for whatever reason is not in charge of the 3 million person Defense Department. And so there is a difference. Let me change the subject though, because we're running out of time. Sources tell CNN that senior Biden administration officials are currently discussing issuing blanket pardons to protect certain individuals from potential retribution once President-elect Trump becomes President Trump. Just this morning, Mr. Trump said, quote, maybe Biden should issue those blanket pardons. And he said about the House January 6th committee, quote, for what they did, honestly, they should go to jail, unquote. What do you think about Trump saying that they should go to jail? What do you think about the idea of blanket pardons?
Well, first of all, when you start talking about the pardons, President Biden can use them however they want to. When he decided to pardon Hunter, I don't think that came to shock. It was the shock that he came out and said he wasn't ever going to do it. But as a father of 6 kids, kind of understand that. As far as weaponizing the DOJ and going after political opponents, the only party that's ever done that is the Democrat Party. When President Trump was in office the first time as the 45th president, he didn't go after the Clintons. He didn't do this. As soon as Pelosi became Speaker of the House, though, she did go after Trump. Who did weaponize the DOJ was the FBI, or was the FBI with the DOJ going after President Trump. When they went after classified documents, they obviously treated President Trump much different than they did President Biden. And so who's weaponizes them? Now, if they are afraid of that because they're afraid the same tool they used against President Trump could be used against them, then, hey, President Biden has a right to do that. But I don't think they have a reason to be afraid. Now, I think that an investigation should be looked into if there was criminal activity that took place with the January 6th committee. There was a lot of questions that didn't get answered. There was a lot of information that was destroyed. Why did they destroy it? Why did they refuse to allow a lot of people to testify or their testimony to actually become public? If the American people want to know that, then maybe we do another hearing. But the first thing we need to do is hold people accountable from the Afghanistan withdrawal. That's where they should be looking at, because I think there was real criminal activity that took place there. Like, for instance, Ambassador Promogine telling me personally, when we were over there trying to get Americans out, and my group trying to get Americans out, that he was told not to assist us in any way, from Washington, D.C. Who gave him that order that he wasn't supposed to help me as a member of Congress at the time, trying to get Americans out? We're there on the ground, pulling people across the Panjshir Bridge into Chekistan. He's the ambassador of Chekistan, and he was told by the State Department not to assist us in any way. That's a criminal charge that should be investigated. Those things should be looked at.
Thank you so much, Senator Mark Wayne Mullin of the great state of Oklahoma. Good to see you, sir. Thanks for joining us this morning.